Aimee, thank you so much for coming in today. I am really excited about being around your energy right now because I feel like I need a bit of Aimee energy in my life. So,
No pressure, no pressure.
so thank you for taking the time to be here.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to talk about limitless honesty, which was quite clearly your super. I mean, we played around with a few, but quite clearly your superpower. What does honesty mean to you?
Saying it as it is and not being fearful of, I think, the impact or consequence of it. I mean, and that doesn't mean not being kind, but sometimes being honest is being kind, or the most kind you can be. And I think it's something for me, with clients, with staff, in my personal life, it's done me really well. I think people respect that they know what they're going to get from you, and there's a comfort and almost surety in that. It's sort of, they can read you a lot more easily because they know there's no hidden agenda. And I kind of, with clients, think they pay us for a point of view. You don't need to take my point of view, but I'll give it to you because that's what you pay me for. And I say the same internally. Like, I don't know if I agree with that, and this is my 2 cents, but you might not want to hear that, but you're paying me to tell you what I think, not to always just do what you ask. So, yeah.
I love that. And I love the word respect. I grappled quite early in my career around that. I really wanted to be liked rather than be respected. And that reframing in terms of like sometimes being honest can actually lead to you not being the most popular person in the
Yeah.
room, but it does lead to respect.
Yeah, I was having a conversation this morning, actually, a mentoring chat with someone who I love dearly, and it's her first really, really senior role. And I said, I think you are used to being really liked as a manager or as a leader, but when you step into that next level, which you've just stepped into, you've got to get more comfortable. Your decisions aren't always going to be popular, but that doesn't make them wrong. And I think that is a big learning curve for a lot of people as you move into these roles. We all want to be liked. Like, it's kind of human nature to want approval and to seek that. But you need to sometimes be comfortable that the right decision that might be awesome long term isn't always a great feel for some people short term.
And have you always been brutally honest, or is there a point in your career where did you learn to be honest the hard way? Like, what's your journey with honesty?
For starters, I've got a terrible poker face. So I just actually was judging Cannes Lions, and a lady I've never met before till this week said to me, "You should never play poker because you are so easy to read." So part of it, I think, is my thoughts run through my face in terms of expression. I think we were raised that way. I kind of recall these moments growing up, particularly my dad, who's like super inquisitive, always wanted to talk about politics and the world. We were raised to debate it. And that was, my husband first came over for dinner. He was like, my God, that was like such an intense conversation because we're raised to kind of unpack it, to play devil's advocate. And it was sort of how I grew up. So, yeah, maybe fairly comfortable. I mean, it's not, I think it depends who you're being honest to. I was having another chat with someone this week who was looking at how to give feedback to their boss, and that's not a comfortable place. And I can't say I always run into that and go, I can't wait to do it. But I think if you do things with positive intent, it's half of the battle.
Let's talk about feedback to the boss, because I run an NGen session this morning with the MFA, and I basically open mic'd it and just said to everyone, what do you want to learn? It was a session called Burnout is Avoidable. And I was like, what do you all want to learn? And I reckon 90% in the room came to understand, how do I communicate with my boss? So I'm going to ask you two questions here. One is, how do I communicate with my boss some negative feedback or the fact that I'm burnout, or basically the honest thing that I want to say that I don't say? How do I do that? And the second part of this question is, if they don't listen and it doesn't work the first time, what's the next steps?
I think on your first question, I can only deal with one thing at a time. Multitasking is no longer my strength. On your first question, I think I often say to people, seek to try and understand before you give the feedback, because often there is context to why something is happening, either in the business, in someone's personal life. And if you go in blind, it can often not end up where you think it's going to. So seek to understand, ask the questions. And one of the best lessons I think I was taught early in my career is to question things and to seek clarity, because in seeking clarity, particularly with a client, you often get to the nugget underneath the problem that they've briefed you on. They brief you on, we want to drive X% increase in awareness. That's not their problem. Their problem's something under that. But if you don't ask the right questions, you rarely get to the sort of root cause of a problem. And I think that is our instinct often to respond to what is on the surface. And I think it's the same managing people, the same managing your boss. If you seek to understand what is happening in the business, what are the pressures that you're facing into, my boss sits in New York. I don't spend a lot of time with him, but the first part of every one of our conversation is what's happening in the business, what's the big pressures, where are things at, because it helps equip me with how to navigate whatever else I need to ask for, do, say. So that would be my first thing, is seek to understand the context of what you're operating in, whatever that may be. And if that doesn't land you to explaining why someone's behaviour is understandable, then you still probably have a course to go in terms of giving the feedback. Some people are super receptive to feedback and seek it out, and some people don't want it. The way that I have tended to go about it, and maybe that's not right, but I'll share it anyhow, is I usually sit on it and really think about it if it's big feedback, because in your moment you're not usually at your best, like when you're feeling really tired or emotional or burnt out. So digest it and then think about how to explain it in the context of what it means to you and what it means to the business would be the two things. It's hard to ignore something that's going to have a massive impact on the business or a massive impact on an individual, but you need to contextualize that in quite a rational way, I think, for people to consistently understand it.
I love that. And do you know what else you've pointed out there, probably not deliberately, is that everyone has a boss. Like, even you talking around your boss, like as you were speaking then, I'm like, well, actually, we should be asking around, what does your boss think of this, right? Because you're someone I don't consider to have a boss.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, and I'm sure
Trust me, I've got many.
yeah, but I think that's something that people need to understand, that everyone's working into someone somewhere.
Yeah,
and
and if it's not a person, it's a board.
Yeah, and even to be able to understand not necessarily what's your direct manager going through, but the person above them. And to your point around understanding that bigger context is so important, because we're all getting pressure from somewhere, and unless we push that up the
It's also
chain.
our clients. It amazes me. I somehow recently had the absolute privilege actually to go to a client whip. I was in there for another meeting, and I ended up in this, and not a major client, a smaller client. And so I didn't have anything to contribute other than really to sit back and listen, which I enjoyed. But what struck me, and I had the conversation afterwards, is the meeting started and the team went straight into they were really well prepared, really considered, and they were probably thinking, why is Aimee in our whip? But they didn't ask, how's the business? How are you? What have been the big things happen this week? Where are the sales? And I think sometimes we forget how much our clients want to have that conversation, and if it's a one-on-one, how they're personally feeling. And some people do this exceptionally well, like they almost know the person's whole life story because they've spent the time and they've really unpacked it. But I think sometimes we miss that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also like I'd love to put a little test to you here. Not someone from your business, but I was speaking to someone from another business earlier, and they said, oh, the exec always say, come and talk to us. We want to hear your feedback. They said, but in reality, they don't want to hear our feedback, or we don't want to go and give them the feedback because we're too scared. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I can see that from both sides. Like I can remember being in that position and really nervous about even asking a question in a meeting or voicing something. And then I think about where I'm now, and when I get feedback, positive and constructive, it's so well received, and most of the time it's you're kind of desperate to know, did that land, didn't land. I think if leaders are saying it and not putting the infrastructure in place to enable it, that to me is the gap, is the proposition to the execution's missing. And so I think in that instance, I'd say if I was that person, I would say put a suggestion in to say, why don't we set up these mechanisms to get feedback, whether it's, anonymous questions every week or every big meeting and event we do, whether it's our quarterly all staff presentation or the conference we've just done, we seek feedback, like a rating out of 5. What did you like? What didn't you like? What could we do better? Like that we should be seeking feedback as well. So I think there's responsibility on both sides. If you're not asking in a way that creates safety and comfort for people to give it, you haven't thought it through, or you probably genuinely don't want it. But also, if you're sitting there with feedback to give, there's always a mechanism to give it.
I think there's that really simple, don't ask, do you have any feedback for me? Ask, what could I do better?
Yeah.
And like be specific in terms of, I actually want an answer from you. I was talking to someone who was from your business the other day, actually. And we can delete this out if you don't want your boss hearing this bit. But they said to me, Aimee always will overshare with the team deliberately, even if she's not really meant to. Because she cares about what how the team feel about everything, and that kind of like over communication. Can we talk? I honestly think it's like the bit that so many leaders don't understand, in terms of most people can manage change if they understand what's going on and the impact. Can you just dig into the little bit around the need for that, the bravery in that, and why more people should be doing that?
It might be worth just going back a little bit, because I don't think I've always been like that. I think I was very conscious of what I said, and did I say it properly, and how will that be perceived, and did my boss think I handled that well? I think we all go through an element of that. And I think when we were chatting earlier, I talked a little bit about COVID, because it was a big moment for me in realising how to do that comfortably and to do it in a way that felt really genuine to who I am. And it was the fact, I think, that there was no blueprint to how to lead through COVID. No one knew what was coming. No one knew what was going to happen. And so for my entire career, I sort of felt like someone had done what I was doing always before. And I was trying to, I think, emulate that in a way that I thought was right. And I probably got some of it right, and I probably got some of it horribly wrong. What happened in COVID, which was a bit of an unlock, and I just had my second child, so I think I was at a quite pivotal moment. I went back to work, and I can really clearly remember thinking, how am I going to juggle 2 kids, one 3.5, one a newborn or 3 months old. And literally 3 weeks later, we were in lockdown. So it was quite a juxtaposition. But what I learnt through that is, because there was no blueprint and there was no rule book, there wasn't a right or wrong. You just had to do it in a way that felt really genuine and authentic to you. And what became apparently clear is that people wanted information. And you saw that in general consumer behaviour. You saw the increase in news, the increase in people looking to medical professions for guidance. Like when have we ever had the health minister on the TV every single day? It was quite an exceptional time. And it was no different for leaders of business. They were suddenly, I was getting asked questions like, are people going to die? Are these things that we're going to lose? Like things I had no control on. Will we be able to travel again? I was like, I don't know. But I realised the questions were so big, I had to be super honest about what I did know and what I didn't know. And there was a lady who has stayed with me in my brain ever since, because I followed this premise a lot. A lady called Nancy Cohen, who wrote a book, Forged in Crisis. She's a Harvard professor who studies through history how leaders manage and lead through a crisis, famous leaders throughout time. And she talks about, and she did a podcast right around the time of COVID, and she said the number one learning out of looking at the best leaders through history is that your job is to communicate with brutal honesty but give eternal hope. And that was sort of my premise. And to any kind of hard discussion or news, I go through thinking I have to be honest, but I have to tell them this is how we're going to get out of this. This is the direction. And so to come back to your question, I think what happened in COVID, because I didn't have a formula of how I think it should be done, I just did it in a way that felt real to me. And ever since then, I felt really comfortable sharing information. I always share more than I intend, but I don't think I ever share anything that's that would get us into trouble from a confidentiality point of view. But I'm like, whatever I know that will help people understand the context, back to the sort of context, and have clarity on why we're making these decisions and see where we are going is kind of my model for thinking it through in a really rational way. And then I can also say, hand on my heart, I've told you what I know, and when I know more, I will tell you more, and feel quite, I guess, good within myself that I've done the right thing by people with that, if that makes any sense.
No, I love it. And I think it's so important. I think that everything I see, the training program that sells the most of all the training programs I run is difficult conversations, because I think people are just terrified of having the difficult conversations. And to your point, everyone just wants information. We all want to ask the difficult questions, but everyone's too scared to do it. Digging into that, I believe that one conversation can actually change everything that's going on for you, like in terms of work, personal life. If you genuinely connect with yourself and what you want, and you say, okay, what boundary do I need to set? Therefore, what difficult conversation do I need to have? Can be game changing. What's a difficult conversation for you that you're really glad you had?
It's a good question. A difficult conversation. I think the most difficult thing I've ever gone to work-wise would be like when I first stepped into the CEO role of OMD. Like, your first CEO role it was very daunting. You know, I'd obviously followed in someone's footsteps who'd done an amazing job, had been there a long time, was still there, and I had a young baby. There's a theme here. Whenever I have young children, I must get quite my first child. So I was kind of grappling with being a new mum and the impact that would or could or should have on my career, and trying to find my feet in a role where I was leading people who'd been my peer. And I think naturally when you're under pressure, you go to your instinct of what's got me here will get me there. And it's normally the complete reverse of that. And I had awesome people around me, but I quite quickly figured out that I wasn't doing it brilliantly. And
How did you figure that out?
I sort of sensed it, and there just wasn't a great energy. The exco still wasn't quite gelling. I mean, it was good. We were still doing pretty well, but I didn't feel like I'd won them. And as a leader, you kind of need to win your team. They need to want to follow you. And so I went to see someone speak with Martin Cowie, who was our chief people officer at the time. Just by coincidence, we went to see this guy speak, Michael Bunting. And he was talking about, he had this thing, and I'll probably get the stat wrong, but it was something along the lines of the biggest impact to a person's mental well-being is their boss. It equates to like 60 to 70% of their mental well-being. And I sort of had a bit of an aha moment of, I'm actually probably negatively impacting people's well-being. And Marv did an awesome job of and he's exceptional at this, at kind of putting his arms around you and getting you into the right position to see it and hear it and do something about it. And we got Michael Bunting in. He ran a program probably for about 18 months. It was a long program. And the first thing he did, he talked to everybody and did all the normal things. We did a 360. And in that 360, it was the longest 360 I've ever done. It went for like 28 pages. It was very, very long. And everybody filled out all of these elements of my leadership. And then I came into the room and I had to give everyone that 360 and tell them what I'd read from their feedback, what I'd taken on board, my interpretation of it, where I needed clarity, what I wanted to understand more. And then I had to leave. I did that for maybe 45 minutes. Then I had to leave the room. And for about an hour and a half, they talked about the feedback.
This is juicy.
It was the longest hour and a half of my life, to be honest. And then I came back and they each gave me the one behaviour that they wanted me to work on. And his philosophy is that it's really easy to add tasks to what you do, to go, you know what, Chloe, we're going to spend more time together. I'll put in a weekly whip. Tick, job done. Pretty easy. It's pretty easy to follow through. But to actually change behaviour is quite a hard thing to do. So you can only ever work on one thing at a time, is his philosophy, which I loved, because I was like, one thing, I can remember it, let's go. And I came back in, they gave me the feedback, and that was an incredibly challenging conversation at scale, and I felt hugely exposed. And I had to leave, and I think I left and burst into tears for about an hour.
Fair.
And I've done it about 6 times since. And so the good thing that he did, which I haven't done every time, but he then monitored my progress on the behaviour. So I think every month to 6 weeks, he would go back and go, where is Aimee at on the behaviour and how has it moved forward? And that did a lot of things. The number one thing did is made me listen to the feedback and think about how my behaviour was impacting people. And impacting people differently was the other major insight, which sounds super obvious. But I had some people in the room going, yeah, no, I'm all good. Like that kind of works that she does that. And other people going, no, that really doesn't work. So that was also your ability to adapt your style and really understand how you do that came out of that discussion quite overtly. And then the second thing that it did for me and that group is it created a real transparency around that we all have flaws. They then did that process with their teams and we rolled it through a lot of the business. But in doing it, and then we each came back and they shared their behaviour to the exco. And so there was a sort of sense of, oh, we've all got stuff we're working on. And it's okay to have things that you're not great at. Whereas I think we spend a lot of our career either trying to gloss over those things or hide them or make them go away rather than actually just own it and be okay that everyone in this room right now has something that they're working on that they're not great at. And if we know about it, we can probably help them. So that was probably the most challenging conversation as such.
Yeah, fair. I get that. I really liked what you said around the program made me hear the feedback properly and listen to it. One of the things that came up in the NGen session today was around, I was talking to them about how to have a difficult conversation. And they said, yeah, but what about if your boss doesn't listen? And I said, what you've got to understand is your boss has got 9 million other things going on. And you almost need to take some accountability for going in and having this difficult conversation a second time. Like if you're going to be stretching if you want a stretch project, you ask for one and you don't get it, don't give up.
Yeah.
Like go in and have that difficult conversation again.
Thing.
Yeah. But I think, oh my God, we've gone there already. I love it. But I think that's something that we need to remind people, like just because you've had the difficult conversation once, you need to go in again because they won't necessarily hear it. And I think you made that point beautifully around that. I also love the point around you can only do one thing at a time. For me, I've become obsessed with self-belief. Like the last year is like that, it's almost like I don't care about anything else. It's like, well, I'm listening out for in conversations and I've become really focused on it. Where are you at in your self-belief journey? Just to flip it a little bit.
Look, I think, it's how you define self-belief. Do I have confidence in my capability and skill set? Yes. Do I have doubts in myself sometimes and the actions I make? Yes. But I think that wouldn't be human if you didn't. I think we chatted about this a few weeks ago. I feel like I feel moderately confident and that I've got good self-belief. I do find myself, like yesterday I had a meeting and I was like, I didn't handle that quite right. But I think that's kind of the performance angle is it's like you can have self-belief and still find improvement. They're not mutually exclusive. So yeah, I feel pretty good. I don't know. I'm nervous to say that because I kind of look at it and go, I feel incredibly lucky. Like and not lucky in I got here because of luck, but fortunate that we live in this amazing country. I've got, a fridge full of food. I've got a wonderful family. I'm healthy. I've got a great job. I love what I do. I love my team. And so all of that, I think, creates a good self-belief. They're things that I've created. They're things that I've made happen. They're people I've chosen to marry and have chosen to marry me, So yeah, I think I think sometimes we put self-belief on a pedestal of it. You have to be, to really have belief in yourself, you've got to be an Olympic athlete. Like sometimes I think self-belief's just being comfortable with where you're at and what you've done. And I feel really good about where I'm at and what I've done. Would I like to do more? Yeah, but I feel good.
Yeah. And I think it's about, for me, self-belief's about who am I and knowing that when things go wrong, I'm going to be me and I'm going to be okay to get through it. I want to talk to you a little bit around the word limitless, because we've got that in common at the moment,
Yeah, we
haven't
do.
we?
It's funny when your podcast started, I was like, oh, that's where I'm going.
I think it's a really important word. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that in the thinking around self-belief, because my journey with self-belief was very much driven by realizing I didn't have any, which was fun. And then all my friends saying to me, you're going to be unstoppable. Everything, you're going to be unstoppable. And I just thought, oh, unstoppable sounds horrible. I just want to stop. But but what they actually meant was limitless, right?
Yeah.
It means that, like, for me, limitless is around how do I push my boundaries to the limits that I want to push them to, and having enough belief in myself to go, oh, I'll push that a bit further, and I'll push that a bit further. And
Yeah.
to live within that kind of constraints, my own constraints that I put on myself, not what society's put on me. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about your journey through Limitless in terms of little Aimee
Yeah.
to now, and how you feel about that.
Yeah, it's interesting when you just articulated self-belief around when times get tough, your ability to get through it. And I do think the tough things you've been through usually build self-belief. So often I think when you have experienced something really tough, you come out often broken, but then rebuild into, okay, I've survived this, so therefore I'm going to be okay. Little Aimee, where am I going with this?
We're taking
I
your
answered a question
journey.
that wasn't a question.
No, you're fine. We're taking the journey from, if we think about the word limitless and the concept of limitless, and we start from little Aimee right through to the Aimee sitting before me today.
Yeah. Oh, look, I had a I think a quite interesting childhood. My parents were sort of non-conventional in their own way. My dad is like this really free spirit, did a big corporate job, decided at 40 that he hated it, quit his job and sailed around the Pacific on a yacht. Ended up buying 250 acres in Tasmania and building a fruit farm. And so I think that upbringing, and with him particularly, I'll talk a bit about mum in a moment, but with dad, what dad really instilled in us is just this sense of determination and grit, and to get out and do things, and that you don't have to do things in a really conventional way. It's okay to opt out of something and try something new. And he built, I think, in my brother and I quite an entrepreneurial spirit because of that. He put us through lots of hard experiences in terms of, I can think about being 4 or 5 and hiking for 7 days with all my food in my bag because I had to carry my own food. Like, he was big on that, like pushing us to kind of realize what we were capable of. So I had him on one side, and then my mum, who we had quite a different experience. They divorced when I was 3. I don't ever really remember them together. That's never been a massive factor for me, interestingly. But we ended up spending a lot of our weekdays with our mother and weekends with our father. And mum was she was just an amazing woman. She had this sort of tenacity and sense of fun and a real energy about her, and sort of self-made in a lot of ways. She quit school at 16 and then went and decided that my dad couldn't have a degree and if she didn't have one, so did a degree in half the time and ended up studying biochemistry, and was just very, very bright. But she sadly got cancer when I was about 5. And I didn't really understand that she had cancer. I just understood she was sick. And we lived on the Central Coast at that point. And for 5 years, she fought cancer. And my brother and I were there from sort of 5 to 10. And he would have been 16 when she passed away. So we kind of took on this unknown role to us at the time as her carer. So I, at 7, would catch the bus to the supermarket, $150 in my pocket, would do a full grocery shop and would try and explain to the lady at the cash register why I was there by myself, walk outside and get in a taxi, put all the food in the taxi, go home and Mum would ask why I'd bought so many chocolates and chips. But I'm like, if you send your 7-year-old to the supermarket, that's probably what will happen. And so I had this sense of responsibility quite young. My brother, he would carry Mum to the bathroom when she couldn't walk. We would give her medications, quite an unusual setup, and no one really knew about it. We were never told not to talk about it. We just didn't really talk about it. And I think we both normalised it. I certainly normalised it. I can remember a teacher saying the parent-teacher interviews were coming up, and I was like, well, my mum won't be able to come because she's sick. And he was like, well, she'll be better from the flu then. And I was like, oh, no, it's 3 years in. She's not going to be better. So that was a quite unusual context. And so Limitless, for me, she persevered through that because she wanted us there and she wanted us to have as normal experience and as a loving environment as possible. And she did a lot to make that happen. What I've just described sounds quite grim, but I think it was against the backdrop of, she was so much fun. She would have a blood transfusion on Thursday so she could take me horse riding on Saturday. She did so much to make that the best upbringing we could have. She'd sew outfits for school plays. She'd bake cakes and then get someone to pick them up because she couldn't get to the school. She went a long way to making that quite a special experience. We always had a lot of love, even though there was a lot of chaos sort of going on. And Limitless for me became about, and I think about it a lot, you get one crack at things in life, one life. And I don't want to finish my life not thinking I gave everything a really good go. And Limitless is about pushing the boundaries or removing boundaries for me, not thinking in a limited way, going beyond what you think is possible. And we have this chat a lot at work. I'll be like, is this going to be the best work we've ever done in our careers? Let's push it. Let's go for it. If it's not great or we don't win the pitch or the client doesn't love it, that's okay. We can sit here and go, we feel really proud of what we've done and there's no more we could have done. And I think about that a lot. I think about my mum, having a blood transfusion on Thursday so she could have an amazing weekend with us and going, that's about pushing boundaries in a way that I've, I guess, taken and really put it into a lot of my day-to-day, whether it be with the kids or work. So that's probably where a lot of that stems from, sort of Dad's entrepreneurial, pushing us to do things we didn't think were possible and showing us the stretch in our capacity and capability and building more resilience physically than I could have ever imagined. Then Mum emotionally showing us what it takes to get through really hard times. And then her obviously passing away would be the most pivotal thing that's ever happened in my life. And probably had the most impact on me as how I am as a person, how I mother, how I live. So yeah, I think, did I?
Oh, you answered it perfectly, and thank you for sharing about your mum. I had a friend say to me the other day that people die twice, once when they actually die and then once when this is the last time they're spoken about. And I love that we're recording things like this about people's mums on here because I think it's so special to keep their legacy going and keep that fight that she had. She does sound like a limitless woman. We would would love to have had her on. She sounds like she Don't you think as well people make sense when you hear about their childhood and you go, oh, Aimee makes sense to me now. Do you know what I mean? There's that element. There's that element of when I said I walked in here and I was like, I need a bit of Aimee energy right now. It's because of that childhood, right? Because we bring all that with us, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's a really beautiful thing, I think. One of the things that I do at the beginning of a training session, you kind of touched on this, is I say to the team, what would your team look like if everyone believed in themselves? And everyone kind of looks around the room. We talk about what limitless means in that space. But I almost want to ask you that question as we're on the topic.
What would my team look like?
If everyone believed in themselves.
It's interesting. We've been there's a wonderful lady who we've been spending a lot of time with, Emma Murray, who talks about A game and B game. And for me, everyone believing in yourself's being in your A game and knowing when you're not in your A game. It's kind of that when you're in your A game, you're focused on get this done, executing to your best possible plan. When you're in your B game, you're spiraling into, I don't have enough time, it's all too hard, the job's too big, the person's not lifting their weight. it's not thinking about what you can control and change. And so for me, self-belief, I liken a lot to the narrative that we talk a lot about, which is A game, B game. And self-belief for me is about people being really clear on what their best execution looks like, and executing to the bits they can control as well as they possibly
Mm.
can. And I think if that's what it would look like, everyone executing their best possible process and not worrying about all the things in life that we can't control.
Yeah, those not. I remember the first episode that we did with Kathy O'Connor, and she just talked about that being the game changing thing in her career around just stepping away from what she can't
Yeah.
control and really honing in on what she can. And I think that it sounds so simple, but it's so not how people live their lives. Like there's such a natural negativity bias in our brain, and like it's almost, I love the work that you guys are doing internally, because there's that need to actually share that narrative and
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
focus on it.
And everyone is talking about it, which is quite lovely. She uses another, just a more visual cue, which I love. She's like, it's like a flashlight. You have a head torch on your head. And as a leader, wherever you're shining that is where the business is looking. And if you're moving it all over the place, nobody knows where to look. And I think it's another good way of thinking about, I'm responsible for what we focus on and where we go. And anyone leading a team's the same. Like, I don't think that's limited to running the company. I think it's through a business. And being in your A game's being really clear on, I'm executing the best possible plan to get to that direction that person's shining the flashlight on. So that, and I think that is inherent in the topic of self-belief. If you have real clarity around what it looks, and importantly what it feels like to be in your A game, then I think you're in pretty good state.
Yeah, I love that. And going back to what you were saying earlier around win the team, I feel like that flashlight is how you win the team, right? Like how you keep everyone focused on that one shining light. I want to ask you about honesty with yourself.
Yeah.
Um, because I think we've kind of touched on honesty with other people. How honest are you with yourself, and how do you hold yourself accountable to honesty? It's quite a tough question, that
Yeah, it
one.
is a tough question. I think you can always be more honest with yourself, but I do think one of the other things I'd say is having the people around you who have trust and confidence in telling you. We used to call it the truth serum, like, I think about someone in my team. I'll walk out of a meeting and they're like, you didn't handle that very well. Like, I think you should have done this, and also how you seek the feedback. Like, it's easy to get stuck in the narrative that's in your head because you're telling a narrative quite often about, we're doing this, we're doing this. But if you ask enough people, you'll get, quite often, you might not get, you're terrible and you've done it, but you'll get hints of, you know, I think I had an exco yesterday. I touched base with probably 3/4 of the exco afterwards to see, how did it go? Some just a text. What'd you think? Like, what's the vibe? It's sort of the temperature check. Like, and you kind of intuitively know when it's not great, or when there's someone a bit spiky or sparky and they're not quite themselves. And that, I think, recognizing that and leaning into that is about being honest to yourself. Like, if you just ignore it and pretend it's all good, it doesn't get better.
Yeah.
It rarely goes away. So look, I work hard at being honest with myself. I think I have this sort of ritual of driving home every day and I'm like, what did I do today? How could I do it better? I won't see it all because I'm seeing it from my lens, but I think it's about seeking feedback and getting the inputs as you go, and being super intuitive to people and how they show up. And when you're stressed, you don't always see it, or you're rushing, or there's a lot going on. But I think if you've got the right people around you, there's a Michael Bunting, two-way accountability, the 200% accountability piece. Like, I owe it to myself to be honest, but everybody else owes it to me and to themselves to be honest. Like, I think I do a good job. I could always do better because I think we get stuck in our own narrative of self-belief.
What's the most honest conversation that you've ever had with yourself?
Work-wise?
Up to you. The mic is yours.
there's been lots of big moments in life where I've kind of opted for a separate path or done something quite different because I've intuitively said to myself, this is not where I want to be. I quit my job 2 years in and went and was a hiking director in New York for a summer and traveled around South America. It wasn't a honest conversation, but I think it was honesty about recognizing I wasn't thriving in the environment I was in and being okay that there could be a different path. I think the conversation I had when I took the job at WPP/Group M was a fairly confronting but honest conversation and a really, probably the hardest work decision I've ever made to leave a team I loved and a business I really enjoyed working in and a boss I loved to go do something that was really outside of my comfort zone, which might sound crazy because it's not a massively different job, but it was a rebuild. It was standing a bit more on my own 2 feet, losing a lot of the security and comfort and equity that I'd had. That took me because I quite easily could have opted out of that. I was on the path of, no, I'm not going to do it. I've said this publicly a couple of times. I said no 2 or maybe 3 times, and I'd made peace with that. And then I had another call, and I sort of went, Aimee, why are you? What is holding you back from this? Is it your desire not to want to put too much pressure on your family, and is that the right decision? Is it your lack of confidence that you can do the job? Is it you just love what you're doing and there's a fear that you won't ever make something as good or build something as good in terms of culture elsewhere? And I did. I said, you know what, Ames, you've kind of got to stand up, step up. You got to back yourself into this. So it's a slightly different. It wasn't a self-critique, but it was are you being really honest with yourself about why you're not taking this and what's holding you back? And I think I'd said a lot about, I don't want to put the kids through that. And it wasn't that. It was that I was nervous I wasn't going to do a good job. And I was sad to be leaving people I loved working with. So that was and that went on for 5 or 6 weeks of me in my head and quite emotional and quite distressed. And my husband was like, just make a decision. I can't cope anymore. So that's probably a different answer to the question. But.
No, and I love that you've said that. I love the answer to that in terms of we make excuses, right? We kind of to keep ourselves safe, and that's what we're all craving, safety.
Yeah.
We're all craving that feeling of feeling safe. But so we make excuses around, oh no, I would never want that. I've had conversations with people where I'm like, I think you want to be a CEO, or I think you want to, and they'll go, oh no, because of all these reasons. And then when you let them sit with it for a bit, going back to that limitless equation, it's are you what's holding you back on these limits? And I feel I love that we've kind of come full circle on this. On your moving over to WPP was actually your limitless moment.
Yeah.
And now here we are kind of reflecting on that.
It was a big, and you know what, the first year I think I was going, oh my God, what have I done? Because it's hard. But I fundamentally believe you either like building things or you like maintaining things. And I like building things. So for me it wasn't easy. And I think the other thing that happens, I think we've spoken about this, is everyone talks about wanting growth. I want to learn new things. I want to grow. I want stretch projects. When you get what you want, it's not always that comfortable. And so I've done this, and I definitely, I've talked about this a bit, but I have a moment driving home where I consciously reflect on the day. And that first 6 months driving home, I was like, this is so hard. I don't know the answer to anything that's hitting me, or I'm trying to figure it out. So for me, it was getting really comfortable that I'd put myself in that position because I was growing. And growing doesn't feel good when you're in it all the time. And I think we feel good when we come out the kind of curve and you're feeling you've got more confidence. But when you're in those moments of I don't know what's coming and I don't know how to navigate that, they're the moments of true stretch, but I think, I don't think we always reconcile that at the time.
I love everything you've just said then. It's don't pick the hard path and then expect it to be easy.
Yeah.
It's if you're going to have stretch yourself to your limits and be limitless, make sure that you're almost checking in with yourself before you start intentionally and going, this is going to be hard. It's going to take me out my comfort zone, and be prepared for that.
Yeah.
And consciously check in with yourself all along the way.
And see it through.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time people get into that. You give them the stretch project, the bigger job, and sometimes people fly and you're like, that's awesome. Sometimes they struggle, and sometimes they go, oh, I just don't think I can do it. And it's like, no, like, see it through. And if you can't do it, you can't do it. But don't opt out halfway. And that was for me quite a big, like, you've got to see this through. And if you get a year, 18 months in and you haven't made it work, then you can go, you gave it your best shot.
But I call it I read this somewhere, the valley of despair. It's like a U shape, right? So you go into something like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take this CEO role, and you're kind of having that moment of confidence, and then slowly you'll dip down the U until you're literally in the valley of despair, which is like where most people quit, right? Where people make excuse of like, oh, I better stop this because it's not fair on my kids, or I better stop this because we've got X, Y, and Z going on. And it's the people that are comfortable in the uncomfortable and can push through that not knowing, and it's okay to not know, that then come out the other side of it, that live their life they want to live.
It's interesting. You just made me think about, like, in your comment around self-belief, that was a really low moment in self-belief for me. Like, I think about that dip, and I've got a slide with that dip on it of the journey we've been on, and there was so much noise. Like, I can remember talking to industry bodies, people going, oh, word on the street is that you're not turning it around. And there was a real sense of, oh my God, everyone's watching, or in my narrative in my head, not probably in reality.
Normally I'd say you're right in terms of not everyone's watching, but everyone was watching. Like, normally I go, so, manage your ego, people aren't watching you, but people were watching you. Like, so I get that.
And it was hard, like hard in that, the press was writing stuff around, and I was like, I'm 18 months in, or a year into this at this point. I don't think I was even a year in, to be honest. And we'd hit all of our targets, and it wasn't, we weren't flying off the radar. Like, but my point probably was, and I'd said it when I walked in there, this is a 3-year turnaround. Like, you don't turn around any big business in 6 to 12 months. You get the foundations moving. And so it felt really, I felt quite exposed, and my self-belief did waver quite a bit during that. And I needed a lot of, like, it's okay, see the plan through, Ames, you've got this, both internally and from trusted sources. But yeah, it was a moment of wavering.
And sticking to that longevity of, like, I've made the hard decision, I'm in this now, I'm committed because that's my personality, and I'm going to see this through to the end.
Also for me, I was like, let it feed you, like prove them wrong, let's go. Like, I'm, the tenacity of, I'm going to do this, and the more you say I'm not going to do it, the more I'm going to do it, was sort of my psychological, like, let's get on with it. Like, I'm not going to, if it doesn't succeed, it's not going to be because of the things that people are throwing at me. It'll be because we've given it our best shot, and we just, I don't know, we can't get X, Y, Z to work.
Anyone going through their moment, their limitless moment of, they're in the valley of despair right now, because there'll be people in that valley. I talk to them all the time.
We've all been there.
What advice would you give to people that are in that place right now?
Look, contextualize it. Like, again, like, you have a conversation, like, you know what, we didn't win the pitch that we were going for, which would have given us some momentum and made the business feel good. That's not a real problem. Like, real problems are people fighting cancer, in war zones, not enough food on their table. Like, they're real problems. So I think you've got to contextualize and go, is it true crisis, or is it just a bit of a challenge? And there's a scale to that. And some people will have both. There are things that go on in people's lives that see them in true crisis. So for me, that is always quite reassuring. It's like, and that enables me to draw on some of the things I've talked about today. Like, is this my mother dying of cancer, or is this a pitch that would be nice to win? Like, and I think if you can put a bit of balance to how you're catastrophizing it or not, it starts to give you some more clarity. And then it's like, well, what can you do about it? What are the things within your control that you can grab hold of that will help you build yourself out of it? And the final piece for me is the people around you. Like, it's the thing that, in any of those moments, is a lot of the people around me are awesome at going, we've got this, Ames, like, you're okay. Like, don't read into that. That's okay. And, there's a couple particular people in our business who I've worked with for a very long time who call me on it and they're like, you're going down that. Like, don't listen to that noise. And so I think if you are going to have the people around you who can give you real sense of what's happening, contextualize whether you're catastrophizing or it's a real crisis, and then think about the things you can do to control it, to move it out. Like, once you have a clear plan, follow the plan. Like, it's revisit the plan, amend the plan, but just keep moving.
And look after yourself along the way, right? Like,
good build.
There's just that element of like, because I'm very similar to you in terms of if I want something, I'll go and get it, right? Like, and it's like I'll push myself through, but I have the build that I've learned is the importance of looking after myself along the way. Even that basic, like, knowing that my brain, the part of my amygdala goes into fight or flight or freeze when I'm in those kind of high stress situations. I've started doing the most basic thing, right, which is just playing with your nervous system, but just rubbing my chest and saying you're safe. Like, it's okay, you're safe. Because when you're in those moments, to your point, it feels like the end of the world, but actually, because your brain thinks it's being chased by a tiger or like, it's really threatening. But actually, if we can tell our nervous system, it's all right, we're safe.
Yeah. The other thing for me, which I've learnt through getting older, is sleep is so important. And I think it's important to everyone, but I am, half the time, if I just go to bed and wake up the next day, it's 50% better just from having had a good night's sleep, some time with my family, like reconnection. You got to know it feeds you. And I think if you know that, you'll know you just talked about a physical signal that gives you a view of you're getting to a high stress position. You got to know your signals, and then you got to know how to manage them or get yourself through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Aimee, on honesty, I need a bit of Aimee energy. How do you have if you really want something in life, and you're negotiating, how do you hold yourself and the other person honest in a conversation? Because I think that sometimes there's different emotions involved. I think sometimes there's more at stake.
Yeah.
And I think when there's that extra layer of context, what do you do?
Yeah, I seek to understand, because the more you understand about why and what that person wants enables you to figure out what the meeting point is. And if you're going into it this is kind of my path, you might not see the opportunity. And I'll also go, I think I've had a couple of these conversations recently where I'll be like, look, let's unpack each other's position. I'm thinking more of a commercial negotiation, because you said the word negotiation. We're going into where are we both coming at? What are the needs of each other? And what's the band between that? So how much stretch either way is there? And I'm not much of a game player. Like, there's not a lot of subtlety, Chloe, in case you haven't noticed. So I tend to go straight to where do you need to get to? Or what is it you're trying to achieve out of this? Or how much room to move have you got? Or what is your outcome you want? Like, I think we spend, and I won't lead with that, I'll do a lot of lead into it, but I think trying to get to the crux of it is the important piece. And if you can get to that, what is it, the thing that, there's always something that people won't give up.
Yeah.
I think at any negotiation, there's something that is a deal breaker. You're not going to move that, but you might move the 6 things around it, and their deal breaker most often is not your deal breaker.
Yeah, I love that. And one more question from me, well, 2 more questions, but when honesty goes wrong, what do you do then? Or perceive to have gone wrong? Have you got any examples? Have you got any?
Yeah, look, I've definitely been on that. You were too abrupt, too direct. I will say, like, I don't get honesty right every time. Like, it's definitely people would be listening to this going, I've experienced Aimee's honesty and it's hard. I've learned over the years, and I still don't get this right every time, but humour and sort of bringing yourself into it softens a lot. And particularly, actually, as an Aussie playing in a global business, there's a little bit of Aussie humour that can soften the message you're delivering through a network. With more direct reports or team, I'm probably less direct than I would be in a conversation that's a, global thing around, I don't think we should do this, because I kind of figure I just put it out there, and as long as I do it in this is a thought I've had or a suggestion, I'm not going, it has to be this way. But with the team, I think it's picking your moment and understanding that. Like, I've definitely had times where I've delivered something straight after someone's got news, and I had that feedback actually quite recently. Like, you don't pick your moment very well. You often, I'll tell you about something and then you'll go, yeah, well, I thought we should have done X, Y, Z. And it's like, well, thanks for that right now. I didn't really need it. And the learning for me in that specific conversation was that person needs something different from me. They need me just to go, it's okay, like, let's talk it through. And the feedback needs to follow when they're not feeling it as much. So that I definitely have had. I think the when honesty goes wrong, it's usually because there's not enough trust.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that you need some basis of trust to be really to be honest with people. I still hold a lot back. Like, you can't say everything you think, or you'd have no one wanting to talk to you ever. But I kind of have a lens now. Is this going to be helpful?
Yeah,
Is
that's
now
nice.
the right time for it? Or do I park that and it's a moment in time, like they've done something, it's not a pattern of behaviour, it's just a poor decision, let it go. Like, I think you do. I think I've got a lot better at kind of going, is this a really important thing to be flagging, or is it a minor thing that you should just leave? But yeah,
not leaving anything more than once, because I've seen so many times where something little happens and people make excuses like, oh, well, actually that was because of that, and then they again and again and again until something absolutely minor just completely tips this person over the edge, because there's like 20 other examples that they've kind of held that frustration to. So I actually like your honest approach, because I like people like you in terms of I always know where I stand. Like, that makes me feel more comfortable. I was working with someone the other day and they're like, this wasn't again within your business, but they were like, oh, I'm just really worried what he thinks. And I was like, but he'll tell you. Like, you don't need to worry about it because you'll know. And I think there's something really nice in that.
I had someone say to me, it's when you start working with someone new at a senior level, I always think it just takes a while, and different people it takes longer. And I had someone recently say, not 6 to 12 months ago, but I don't, am I doing a good job? And I'm like, oh my God, you'll never die wondering with me. Like, if I haven't told you, I'm so sorry, you're smashing it. But I'll always be super honest when I think there's, things that we should be doing better. And I'm the same with myself. I left a meeting yesterday. I was like, I didn't do that well. I didn't do this well. Like, and yeah, I think it's half of it's getting it out and talking about it.
Yeah.
And normalizing feedback is also part of the conversation. Like, we shouldn't be, if it's so hard to give feedback, it means we don't have a culture of feedback. If someone's saying, I'm worried what they think, or I haven't given them the feedback, that's a cultural reset that's needed. And I think that takes time to build a culture like that.
Absolutely. I feel like from this conversation, I feel like you're someone who's constantly learning. When I asked a couple of questions around like honesty with yourself, you were defaulting to negative things that you've kind of liked. Do you know what I mean? You're like, oh, yeah, I could have done better, and I get people around me to give me negative feedback, and it was that kind of tone.
Limitless has always been better.
Just in terms of celebrating yourself and talking about, how proud you are of yourself, and that kind of honesty in terms of really, really proud of how I've got here and what I've done and who I am. How good are you at that side of things?
I'm not great. I actually hate talking about myself. I think I said to you when I walked in, like, this is like the most painful hour of my year.
Happy to oblige.
I've enjoyed it a lot, but I get quite sort of, I don't know. And it's not a confidence thing. It's one of being humble's quite important. And just doing it, not always talking about it, is quite important, which is why I think I had this massive moment of self-belief in your dip of despair that you so well well articulated, because people were talking about it, and I was like, oh, they're talking about it, and I'm like, I'm not. I just want to do it. So yeah, look, I am not great, and it's one of the things I get told a lot is I'm not great at celebrating the wins and enjoying the moment. It's something I really work at, and I know is important, and I know when I do it's important. I think it's the idea of pushing and sort of limitless and driving. The driver in me is so relentless, that I want to move forward, and enjoying the moment requires a pause. And so you have to kind of rationalize that. And I know, actually, no, it's important for me. And I know when I do it, I get so much joy out of it, but it's super important to the people around me. And so I've had to really, I almost have to diarize it. I'm like, we're going to do it like, I have to keep it quite top of mind. So that was a really long answer to your question. I think I'm not great at recognizing it as the strength that it definitely is. And I think people who work with me would say, yeah, we know that, and what she says is what she means. And with clients, it builds trust quickly, and that's the benefit of it. And your superpower is always your biggest weakness as well. So it's understanding how it spins with different people.
Yeah, because I've just found this whole conversation so fascinating in that way. And when you listen back to it, you'll see the themes that I mean, right? And I had this conversation with I know you mentioned you listened to Anathea's episode. And it was almost at the end, different reasons, different conversation, but like I kind of spoke to her about this responsibility that I believe people in your position and Athea's position as senior women have to celebrate themselves and say I'm really good, because, and I know it's horrible, it's icky, it's uncomfortable, but I think that from what I've seen in my research into all of this, the gender pay gap, the underrepresentation, all of those things that people like yourself are so passionate about are driven by the fact that it's not okay to say that we're good, right? The joke around, I said I was good at something the other day, and someone said to me, oh, what are you, a man? Like I had that like I had that moment, and I'm like, guys, I'm working really hard on this because I think it's important that other people do it. I'm just going to ask you the same question I asked Anathea, in terms of, do you agree that there's a responsibility for people like you to celebrate themselves and say I'm good? Or does that make you feel so uncomfortable that you're like, oh dear God, Chloe, please leave me alone?
No,
Where do you sit in that question?
I never thought about it as a gender thing until I obviously heard you say it to Anathea. I've always thought it was a like me thing, which sounds so self-centered when I say it, but when you point it out that way, I think people do things in different ways. Like going, oh, I'm really good at this or great at that is definitely important, which is why I'm here. But I think maybe the way that I've thought about that is the joy in achieving cool, great things. It's a quiet joy for me. Like I'm not like, I love just going home, hanging with my family, having a glass of wine and celebrating this has been awesome in that way. Whereas I think the industry is somewhat trained to think that acknowledging you've done something good is quite extroverted and out there. And I'm not an introvert by any means, and I'm not proclaiming that. But I think I also don't want to lose sight of what's really important. And what's really important to me is my family and my friends and the people around me, that they think I've done a good job and that I've supported them. That's what gives me joy, and who I want to recognize that I've done a good job. Like hearing that from somebody in my team is more important to me than any industry award. Or so I think it's how you do it's important, and potentially women do it maybe differently. And is that wrong, or is it okay? And we just need to normalize that there's different ways of
I don't think they do it at all. Like from every conversations I've had, like I'm sitting in front of someone, right, that people would be like, she's amazing, she's done so well, she's incredible. And there's been moments throughout this whole conversation where you've gone, oh, well, I didn't believe myself in this and this, and it's fascinating. Like you're not seeing yourself through my eyes, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going, wouldn't it be wonderful if we lived in a world where Aimee felt like she could come on and go, do you know what? I was really good at this, and that was my limitless moment, and I came out and I done this. Instead, the narrative that I've had with absolutely every amazing woman that's walked into this studio has been, I don't like compliments. Oh, I wouldn't like to say I'm good at that. Oh, you know, I got that because of someone else, and I find the whole thing fascinating. That when I set out to do this project, I wanted to interview people like you because I was like, look, I've got no self-belief, but surely Aimee's got some. So I'll interview her and we'll have a chat about it. And she can teach me how she celebrates herself. And it's been fascinating because even the women that I go, oh, they are.
I don't feel like I've got low self-belief though. So
no.
Is that the same thing, do you think?
I think it's such a long thing to go into and we're at the end. But I think that sit with this thought and get back to me that there is a responsibility for women who have at all levels to advocate for themselves, to celebrate themselves, to say I'm good at this. Because when you look into all the research of where we're at in terms of pay gaps and underrepresentation, there's one key theme that I'm seeing on this, and it's that we won't accept compliments, we won't say that we're good at things, and I'm struggling to find people that really go, this is my superpower, this is what I'm great at, you want to have me in there because I offer this value. Whereas I coach some really fantastic men. This isn't a male versus female thing, but it's a thing that I've noticed. They're not afraid. When I have the conversations, like I had more men reach out at the beginning of this when I launched this podcast going, hey, can you help me? Than I did women, right? So I ended up coaching. I've got a lot of male clients now that I'm now kind of consulting for and coaching with and helping them. And it's a completely different challenge that I'm facing, right? So talking to them, it's a lot more around loneliness. It's a lot more around like not knowing what to say, feeling like they've lost their place. And there's a really key theme with that with the men that I'm coaching. But if I ask them around what their superpower is and what they're good at, they're pretty good at reeling it off to me pretty quickly. But it's and that's, I mean, I'm this is a very small database that I'm working with, but the research backs this as well. That there is a need, I think, for our role models, which are people like you in the industry, to, and maybe it's tall poppy syndrome, and maybe it is because everyone's watching us and we don't want to feel like, you know, oh God, you know, if I put myself out there, are more people going to want to cut me down. But I feel like that's where I'm at in terms of where I want to push this.
Yeah, it's good.
To take that. So I'd love you to sit with that and get back to me.
Good provocation, Chloe. I like it. Good honesty.
Good honesty. Good honesty. Aimee, we finish every episode by just asking who your limitless woman is. So if you could please share her with me.
As in your role model.
Who do you believe is limitless? Who's someone that you see as someone who's limitless?
Oh, there's a lot, I would say. I mean, I go back to my mum.
I knew that was coming.
You know, I don't think there's anyone who's probably, and not in the conventional sense of how I would see it in my current job, but I think about the joy and selflessness and just determination she had, you know, like she was just so fierce and wonderful and warm in all the ways that you kind of getting that magic combo. Would be definitely the person for me. My sister-in-law's amazing. I've got lots of amazing women who've done incredible things around me. You mentioned Kath O'Connor. She's always been awesome to me and mentored me for many, many years. So, yeah, but my mum would be the most in the course of my life impact as someone I think was truly limitless.
Amazing. I'm so glad you took the time to shout her out. Thank you so much, Aimee. I appreciate you. We are out of time.
Awesome.
Come back soon though. Thank you.